Oh my goodness. Are you all right?
He had everything money could buy. Luxury cars, towering penthouses, even his name engraved on charity walls. But that morning, as the sun broke through the trees of City Haven Park, Gabriel Hart was about to find something his billions never gave him. Purpose. Jogging past the fountain, he almost missed it. A stroller tipped on its side near a lonely bench. Milk spilled across the pavement. Then he saw her. A young woman, fainted, her hair matted, her skin pale as frost. And beside her, 3 babies, triplets, tiny faces drained of color, lips dry, bodies still. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Birdsong faded, traffic blurred, and all Gabriel could hear was the weak, trembling whimper of one of the infants. He didn't think, he ran. And in that moment, a billionaire's empty world collided with a mother's desperate struggle. What happened next would change everything. Welcome to Inside Black Door, where real stories touch the deepest corners of the heart. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because what comes next will stay with you forever. City Haven Park shimmered that morning. The kind of stillness only spring could bring. The grass was damp with dew, the air sweet with blooming lilies, and the soft rhythm of joggers' feet echoed through the winding paths. But among all that calm, there was one man running from something no one else could see. Himself. Gabriel Hart's sneakers hit the gravel in perfect rhythm, one stride after another, his breaths even. Controlled, practiced. To the world, he was success personified, the man who built an empire out of algorithms and ambition. But inside, there was only silence, a silence that not even his billions could fill. He had the kind of wealth people write about, private jets, boardrooms and glass towers, a penthouse that kissed the clouds. And yet, every morning he ran, not to stay fit, but to escape the echo of his own emptiness. 10 years ago, love had betrayed him. Since then, he'd learned to live without it, trained himself to feel nothing, to trust no one. Business was safer than people. Money never lied. But fate has a strange way of waiting for the right morning to change a man's life. And for Gabriel, that morning had arrived. He slowed as he neared the old fountain, water glinting in the sun like scattered glass. A mother laughed somewhere in the distance. A boy's kite fluttered above the trees. Everything looked painfully ordinary, until it wasn't. Something caught his eye. A stroller, tipped on its side near a lonely bench. At first it looked like someone had just forgotten it. But then he saw the spilled milk bottle, the tiny hand dangling over the edge of the seat. And his chest tightened. He stepped closer, the sound of his footsteps fading into the whisper of wind. And then he saw her. A young woman, barely in her 20s, slumped against the bench. Her skin was pale, her hair tangled, her lips dry as paper. Beside her, 3 babies, motionless, quiet, their faces drawn, their breaths shallow. For a moment, the world stopped moving. No laughter. No birds. Just the faint, broken whimper of a child trying to breathe. Gabriel froze. His instincts, the same ones that built empires, kicked in. He ran forward, dropped to his knees. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. Her pulse, faint but there. The babies, alive but fading. His heart pounded like it hadn't in years. This wasn't something money could fix with a call or a check. This was now human, real. He looked around. No one close enough to help. Just him, a stranger, and 4 lives hanging by a thread. He swallowed hard, slid his arms beneath her frail body and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, the kind of nothing that tells you everything. About hunger, exhaustion, and how long she must have been fighting alone. With his other hand, he pulled the stroller upright, checking the babies one by one. 3 tiny chests still rising, barely. And as he turned toward his car, one thought pulsed through his mind. Clear, unstoppable. Not this time. I'm not walking away. The hospital lights burned cold white, the kind that drains color out of everything it touches. Gabriel stood there, his shirt clinging to his skin, streaked with dust and milk. He'd driven like a madman, breaking every red light from City Haven Park to St. Helena Medical. Now, as the emergency doors swung shut behind the gurneys, the sound of rushing nurses echoed like waves crashing in his chest. Triple infants, extreme dehydration. One adult female, pulse weak but stable, someone shouted. Gabriel's fingers were still trembling. For the first time in years, he couldn't control his breathing. He wasn't used to this, to not being in control. A nurse turned to him. "Sir, are you the father?" He blinked. The question hit harder than it should have. "No," he said quietly. "I just found them," she nodded. Already gone. Minutes stretched into hours. He sat outside the ICU, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the faint reflection of himself in the glass wall, a man who didn't recognize his own face anymore. Behind that glass, machines beeped softly, tiny bodies wrapped in white, each breath a battle. And in the next room, the young woman. She hadn't woken up. He looked at her through the small window. An oxygen tube traced across her cheek, her lashes trembling ever so slightly. For reasons he couldn't explain, he couldn't look away. She looked so fragile, so painfully human. Something inside him, something buried under layers of years and armor, began to stir. By evening, the chaos had quieted. The nurse approached him again, clipboard in hand. "Sir, we need the mother's name." "Any ID?" Gabriel shook his head. There wasn't one. "Just her and the babies," she sighed. "Without identification, we'll need someone to take responsibility, at least until we contact social services." The words fell heavy. He had meetings scheduled. A board presentation tomorrow. A flight to Singapore in 2 days. His entire life ran on precision. Every hour, every decision, optimized for profit and power. And yet, none of it made sense right now. He looked back through the glass. 3 babies, each no bigger than his forearm. One of them stirred, letting out a weak cry that broke through the sterile silence like a plea from the universe itself. Before he knew it, he'd spoken. "I'll handle it." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, that's a serious—" "I said I'll handle it," he repeated, voice firm now. He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because for the first time in years, something real had asked for him. Not his name, not his money, him. That night, he didn't go home. He sat in the waiting room, jacket off, sleeves rolled, eyes fixed on the doorway that led to the ICU. Every now and then, a nurse would walk by, whisper something, nod. The hours bled together until morning light crept through the blinds. And then, a soft voice. "She's awake." Gabriel's head snapped up. He walked into the dimly lit room. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Confusion clouded her gaze before pain washed over her face. Where are they?" she whispered. "They're safe," Gabriel said softly. "At the hospital nursery." "They're okay now," tears welled instantly. She tried to sit up but winced, clutching her side. He reached out instinctively. "Easy." She looked at him then, really looked. A stranger, standing in a white room, eyes dark with concern. "Who are you?" "Just someone who found you," he said. Her eyes flickered with panic. "My babies. I didn't mean to. I just needed to rest." Her voice broke, crumbling under exhaustion. "It's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to explain right now," but she did. Through shaky breaths, she told him everything. Her name was Elena Rivers. She'd been living in her car for weeks, trying to feed 3 newborns alone after her husband vanished, gone without a trace. She'd sold her wedding ring to buy formula, skipped meals so her children could eat, and that morning in the park, she'd simply collapsed. Gabriel listened, silent, motionless, as if each word was chiseling something deep inside him. When she finished, the room was quiet again. Elena turned her face away, ashamed. "I'm sorry you had to see me like that," she whispered. "I didn't want pity. Just a little more time before everything fell apart." He looked at her, at the bruises beneath her eyes, the tremor in her fingers. "You don't need pity," he said quietly. "You need rest and help." The next day, Gabriel did something he hadn't done in years. He canceled his meetings. His assistant's voice crackled over the phone, confused. "Sir, should I reschedule for next week?" "Indefinitely," he said. "May I ask?" "No, just indefinitely." He hung up before she could reply. By noon, he'd arranged a private room for Elena and her children, covered every medical expense, and ordered supplies she hadn't even thought to ask for. When the nurses wheeled the triplets in, tiny faces pink again, faint giggles breaking the silence, Elena broke down. Her hands trembled as she touched their foreheads. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes brimming. "I don't even know your name." "Gabriel," he said softly, and for the first time, that name felt lighter. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Checkups, baby cries, late-night coffee. He visited every day. Sometimes he'd hold one of the babies. Awkward at first, but learning. The way their small hands wrapped around his finger. The way their eyes followed him, curious and trusting. Elena began to smile again. Small, tired smiles that carried gratitude too deep for words. And Gabriel began to feel something he hadn't in years. It wasn't pity. It was purpose. Each evening, when he left the hospital, the city lights felt different. The same streets, the same skyline. But something inside him had shifted. He'd spent years building towers out of glass and steel, chasing permanence, yet here, in this fragile space between a mother and her children, he'd found something unbreakable, meaning. One night, as he stood by the nursery window, a nurse approached quietly. "They're lucky you found them," she said. "Most people would have walked away." Gabriel didn't answer right away. His reflection stared back, the man who used to measure life in profit margins. He shook his head slowly. "No," he murmured. "I'm the lucky one." And in that moment, he realized he hadn't just saved 4 lives. They'd saved his. It had been almost 3 weeks since that morning in the park. 3 weeks of quiet hospital corridors. The hum of machines and the faint rhythm of newborn breaths. Gabriel had fallen into a strange new routine. Morning board calls, then straight to St. Helena's. He'd grown used to the smell of antiseptic, the sound of soft lullabies echoing from Elena's room. Sometimes he wondered when it had become normal for a billionaire to spend his evenings rocking babies instead of attending charity galas. But something inside him didn't care anymore that evening. The city outside was drenched in rain, windows blurred, streets glistening like liquid glass. Inside, the hospital lights flickered low. Elena sat by the crib, humming softly, one of the babies asleep in her arms. When Gabriel entered, she looked up and smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said. "You probably have 100 meetings tomorrow." He smiled back, tired but genuine. "I canceled them," he said. She raised a brow. "All of them?" "All of them," she laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're impossible." For a moment, silence lingered between them, warm, unspoken, the kind that said more than words ever could. But then, a sound cut through the calm. A sharp, relentless beep from one of the cribs. Elena froze. The color drained from her face. Gabriel turned, eyes wide. One of the babies, the smallest boy, had gone still. Nurses rushed in, voices rising. "Code blue! Get the crash cart!" Elena screamed, a sound that ripped through every wall, every bone in Gabriel's body. He stumbled back, helpless. As doctors swarmed around the tiny form, wires, oxygen, frantic hands, Gabriel's chest tightened. He couldn't breathe. All he could see was the faint rise and fall of a child's chest. Slowing. Then stopping. "Please," Elena sobbed, collapsing into the chair. "Please don't take him, please!" For the first time in years, Gabriel prayed, not to any god he knew, just to something. Something that could make it stop. Minutes felt like hours, and then a single cry. Weak, but alive. The room erupted in motion. "He's breathing again." The nurse shouted. "We got him back!" Elena fell to her knees, hands over her face, sobbing into relief. Gabriel stood frozen, his throat tight, vision blurred. He turned away, gripping the edge of the window for balance. Outside, the rain had turned into a storm, lightning flashing across the skyline. And through the reflection, he saw himself, a man who'd built empires, but never saved anything that mattered until now. Later that night, the doctors assured them the baby would be fine, a temporary complication, nothing more. Elena sat quietly, still shaking, the child safe in her arms again. When she looked up, Gabriel was there, eyes red, voice soft. "You stayed," she whispered. "I wasn't going anywhere." Her lips trembled. "Why? You don't even know us." He hesitated, then said the truest words he'd ever spoken. "Because no one should ever face the world alone." Silence. The storm outside had softened to a gentle drizzle. Elena wiped her tears and looked at him. Really looked at him this time. "You saved us," she said. He shook his head slowly. "No, you saved me." Her brows furrowed, confused. He looked down at the sleeping child and whispered, almost to himself, "Before that day, I thought I had everything. But when I saw you, saw them, I realized how empty it all was." Elena's eyes filled again. "Then maybe we both found what we were looking for." Gabriel smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes after a lifetime of silence. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, soft, golden, alive. Elena and the triplets were finally discharged. Gabriel stood by the car, helping her gently into the seat. She looked at him, hesitant. "I don't know how to thank you," he shook his head. "You don't have to. Just promise me something." "What?" He paused, his voice steady, quiet. "Promise me you'll never give up again." Elena nodded, holding his gaze. "Only if you promise the same." He smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who finally knows why he's alive. As the car drove away, Gabriel stood there, hands in his pockets, watching the city awaken. For the first time, the world didn't feel so empty. The sound of traffic, the chatter of people, the chaos. It all felt alive. And in that quiet morning breeze, he heard a faint echo, a baby's laugh. Carried through the wind, he closed his eyes and let it stay there, a reminder that sometimes the smallest cries wake the biggest hearts. Weeks turned into months. And though the chaos of that night faded, something permanent had shifted inside Gabriel's heart. The mansion that once echoed with silence now carried new sounds. The laughter of babies, the hum of lullabies, the soft rustle of tiny feet crawling across marble floors. Elena had moved in temporarily, at his insistence. "Just until you're steady again," he'd said. But everyone knew, even she, that some distances once crossed are never meant to be walked back. The triplets filled the grand halls with a kind of music no orchestra could match. Their giggles bounced off chandeliers and portraits, and every time Gabriel heard it, it stitched a piece of his heart back together. One morning, as the first light spilled through the curtains, he stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching Elena in the garden. She was laughing, barefoot on the grass, the triplets chasing after butterflies, and for a moment, it didn't look like a billionaire's estate anymore. It looked like home. Dr. Chen, visiting that afternoon, noticed it too. "You've changed," she said, smiling as she packed her bag. Gabriel chuckled softly. "Maybe I just remembered what it means to be human." She nodded, glancing toward the window. "Or maybe you finally let someone remind you." That evening, Gabriel hosted his first dinner in years. Not for investors, not for press, just for Elena, the babies, and a few close friends. He raised his glass quietly. "To second chances," he said, voice warm, eyes steady on Elena's. She smiled, her hand resting gently on one of the babies' backs. "And to the people who believe in them," she replied. Later that night, after everyone had left, Gabriel walked through the quiet hall. He paused near the piano, the same one that had sat untouched for years. He lifted the cover, fingers hesitating over the keys. Elena appeared behind him, holding a blanket, smiling softly. "I didn't know you played," she said. "I used to," he murmured. stopped when life got too loud. "Then maybe," she whispered, placing the blanket over his shoulders. "It's time to play again." He looked at her, the babies asleep upstairs, the house alive with peace, and for the first time, Gabriel didn't feel like the man who had everything. He felt like the man who had enough. Outside, the city shimmered under a quiet night sky, millions of lights flickering like scattered hopes. Gabriel leaned against the window, watching them, whispering to himself. Sometimes, the richest thing a man can do is simply care. And in the faint reflection, his face softened, not the billionaire, not the mogul, just a man who'd finally found his purpose. In the smallest hands he'd ever held,